and was one of my best friends in high school. He comes into town twice a year, and we have these long drinking sessions out in godforsakenville, out there in the burbs somewhere, because he stays in a hotel there for his business. Um, and he was just in on Wednesday, and we talked, and a lot of this, because this thing was happening today, it all hit me. Like, for one thing, he brought all these letters that that I had written to him. We exchanged all these letters back in the day, and he also brought letters that Perry, who's Dave's brother, who we're talking about here, who sort of connects us all with Steve, also wrote to him. So it was sort of an interesting, confluence of events, and it all just hit me last night. That especially like for the young people here, for Adam and Noah and whatnot, like this is just when I think about like what really brought us all together. First of all, Gary's responsible for all of you being here right now, because it's sort of ironic that this high school friend who might be considered a peripheral person in all of this, but actually is the instigator of bringing all these people together, including like some of Perry's best friends and the Bleak House days that was known, Ted DuPont and these other people who were a big part of his life, all happened because of Gary. So I call him the connector. But he brought.
Gary's responsible for you.
Gary's responsible for.
Perry was relative. It was always known as a link.
Right.
Between lab and the USC thing. But he brought Osterbach and you into it. You're saying that.
No, Osterbach brought him into it to me, and that was actually
the Bleak House connection was ongoing.
Right.
Yeah.
Bleak House was this thing at the University of Chicago where all these people lived, and it became a thing into itself. But when Gary and I both went to the University of Chicago, but even though we were best friends in high school, we immediately separated at UFC. It was like a marriage, it was like, okay, it's time to go our separate ways. You got, it's like, oh, we're 18, we gotta, have our own lives. We never talked. He had his own life. He discovered this whole set of friends, including Perry, and I had another set of friends. But then after college, he moved to San Francisco to be a writer and to be to whatever. He got his degree and had no clue what he really wanted to do, but he knew he wanted to write. And
I'm like talking to him as a friend now. So, wasn't his degree in psychology?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had a degree in psychology, but he had no clue what he wanted to do with it. What he wanted to do was go to San Francisco and discover the world and be a writer.
Yeah.
And it's really like sort of writing that brought us all together. I mean, this was Perry too, and this was Steve. Although Steve was really film, and I was kind of music, but we all had this sort of germ of like, wanting to do something different in life.
The creative gene.
Yeah, I guess you could call it the creative gene, and that's ultimately what brought us together. And so one of the things, this letter, this is a classic Perry letter. It may not look like a letter. Where's Dave? He would appreciate this. So this is what he sent. One of the many letters he sent to. One of the many letters he sent to Gary at a time I was living in New York, and Gary and I had been talking. We'd been writing all these letters, and he was going to come live with me in New York. We were both like 21. In the meantime, Perry was living in New Orleans and also writing to Gary, saying he wanted to live in New York, and this was the period during that time when he wanted to live in New York. And
because of the prostitution in Chicago.
Yes, as you can see, sex for Salem's.
Salem's.
Yes, and this is a classic Perry letter. Here's the yellow cab receipt, which many of you may know, and it's got a 25-cent tip on it. But short of reading you this whole letter, which is actually funny in itself, and a lot of these letters, Steve is also mentioned in all these letters, and so basically, Perry and I lived in New York for a while. He left, he disappeared. I moved back to Chicago. I reconnected with him. I got him a job at Lakeshore Center where he met Cindy and Dave, where he met Cindy, and then through Cindy, he met David Quenchers, and through Perry, I met Steve, who also came to Lakeshore Center to try to trim down because he was all of like 160 pounds, and he had to get down to 130 his wrestling weight, which he did. And you know, we became fast friends because we just had all this stuff in common. Like we just had the love of the same things. I don't know what it is really, but so yeah, that's sort of a long story. I could read this letter, but it's sort of funny.